Oh, there we go. Hello, everyone. I think we're all up to snuff. We're all ready to go for yet another evening of anime discussion and anime talk. Hey, Jay, Game Escape, Akko, Angel, good to see you all. As always, I think I also need to twist or change up the camera a bit because I had tweaked things for. There we go. Tweak things for Workshop Wednesday, but we're back on Friday. It has been a long week. We got in a whole new bunch of students, as you know, and this is our first week of full class. Glad to hear that, Angel. Welcome. So I'm about to, but I'm okay. We'll get through the evening. We'll have a good time. We'll talk anime. We'll discuss things. Quite a bit of news this week, which we will get to here in a little bit. But first, wanted to know how your anime weeks have gone. What's new in the world of anime for you all? What have you been watching and enjoying? I continue talking about, continue watching Dumbbell. How heavy are the dumbbells you lift, and just loving it. I'm all caught up on Dumbbell. Not the show I thought I would be caught up with most this season, but that is the one that's just been, just loving the silliness of it, and I guess this has been a week for that. Yes, I'm a full-time lead instructor for a software boot camp, so I teach people how to code, which is fun. All adults. And so that is my job, which certainly takes up some mental energy. This week we're teaching HTML and CSS and other stuff. There's that tea. Loving it. But yeah, also loving Dumbbell, oddly enough. I still haven't caught up on Anne of Green Gables from back in the day. Did catch up on Galaxy Express and Captain Future. Galaxy Express 3.9's, as before, has been kind of uneven. Some amazing episodes and some episodes that are pretty forgettable. One cool thing, I came across an episode of Galaxy Express where this mysterious man joins or boards the Galaxy Express, and he's got this sort of tortured past, and he's this very mysterious guy, and it is clearly voiced by Shar Aznavour's voice actor. And this is while Gundam was first still airing in Japan, so he's immediately typecast. I know Shar was like one of his first anime roles, so I don't know if Galaxy Express, and I suspect this Galaxy Express role was after he got in that Gundam role, and then he was starting to take on a full career. But that was just kind of funny to see Shah showing up. Watching Arifureta, Mausama, Retry, Dungeon. Nice. Plenty of anime out there to watch. Plenty of anime to keep up with. Galaxy Express, it turns out, has been a perfect weekly show. Just one episode a week. Not trying to marathon it. There's so much content there. There's so much material. It would feel overwhelming if I were really committed to trying to finish it, because it's over 100 episodes, I think. But just saying, okay, every week another episode, a little bit more, and I'll get all the way through it. Been watching all the anime from this season. Wow, that is quite the commitment there, Jay. Hats off to you. That's really impressive. Let's go ahead and get to the news, because, there's news in the world of anime. And oh, whoops. I don't have the thing up. It's ready to go. I just forgot to actually put the prompt up there. So we'll get there. Don't worry. Okay. And welcome back to the news in the world of anime for August 23rd, 2019, at least the week thereof. It was reported on Thursday that the Japanese government has issued official tax breaks and relief measures for donations made to Kyoto Animation. Donations toward the studio will be treated the same as donations made for disaster relief, which is not usually done in cases of criminal activity. These tax breaks will lessen the tax burden on the studio, allowing more money to go directly towards rebuilding and to aid those affected, so that is nice. The measures also hope to encourage more corporations and organizations to donate, since their donations will now be tax deductible, which is really nice and really, really good to hear. National and prefectural police are also currently in disagreement over the public release of the names of the victims killed in the Kyoani fire. According to Kyoto Prefectural Police, previous precedent in a crime case such as this calls for the names to be released to the public, but the national police argue against the official release of the names when the families have not given their express consent. Japan's Basic Plan for Crime Victims state that police are at their own discretion to release relevant information on a case-by-case basis, and that both victim privacy and the interest of the public should be taken into account. The lawyer responsible for Kyoani's communications relative to this incident has asked the media to respect the privacy of the victims and families, while also clarifying that the studio is, quote, not asking the police to hold back forever, end quote. So presumably the names will come out eventually. Moving on, another arrest has been made in the continuing crackdown on pirated manga. A 20-year-old Tokyo resident was arrested on Tuesday for allegedly selling pirated digital copies of the Ushijima the Loan Shark manga through a marketplace app. The man was selling under the username Mangamura Shupancho, or Mangamura Branch Office. Undoubtedly seemed very clever at the time, though he may be regretting his choice of pseudonym after this. Yeah, not the most clever thing. Speaking of such things, Shanghai police have shut down a large-scale pirated figure production facility worth an estimated $42 million US. Wow. The facility manufactured counterfeit figures from many popular franchises, selling them for 1/4 of the original prices. Police seized 1,200 figure molds, as well as more than 1 million finished figures, and arrested 25 people involved with the company. So this week's Otaku News moral seems to be, don't run illegal operations. Or at least if you do, don't attract attention. This week also brings several updates regarding existing anime films and media. 2 anime films will be screening in US theaters this fall. Yay. Studio Trigger's Promare, which exceeded earnings of 1 billion yen last week, will be showing at theaters in New York, LA, and Canada in September. Also, the 3D anime film Human Lost is coming to American theaters in October, premiering there first before opening in Japan. Wow. Both films will have separate screenings showing both English subbed and English dubbed versions, as is typical. So that's cool. Meanwhile, Makoto Shinkai's Weathering with You has officially earned more than 10 billion yen, making it the 10th highest earning Japanese film of all time. The film has been open since July 19th and ranked number 1 on its opening weekend. It is the first film to reach this milestone since, guess what? You guessed it, Your Name in 2016. Crunchyroll Expo, meanwhile, will be hosting a premiere showing of the first episode of Didn't I Say to Make My Abilities Average in the Next Life? The screening will take place on Saturday, August 31st, so next week, followed by a discussion panel with the film's producer Hirotsugi Oho. The anime will premiere worldwide in October, so head over to the Crunchyroll Expo if you want to see that. 3 series have also announced upcoming short anime. Digimon has announced a series of 5 anime shorts as part of their continuing 20th anniversary celebrations. The Digimon Adventure Memorial Story Project is running a crowdfunding campaign until October for Japanese residents only, unfortunately, offering Blu-ray discs of the shorts as reward, as well as exclusive screenings for backers. These shorts will tell side stories that didn't make it into the upcoming film. Meanwhile, the anime film Hello World is also getting spin-off anime episodes. The 3-episode series, titled Another World, makes sense, will be set 10 years after the story of that movie. The first anime episode is set to premiere September 13th, a week before the actual movie opens on September 20th. Kind of interesting. Lastly, a short series has been announced based on Bandai Namco Entertainment and Nippon Cultural Broadcasting's radio program, and cast Our Love Nights. The anime will be titled Love Nights AD and will air in Bandai Namco's live streaming app and cast, which launched last year. I have no idea what is actually in that show, but that's pretty cool. Meanwhile, Sazai-san, whoops, wrong one. Sazai-san, the longest-running animated TV series, celebrates its 50th anniversary this year. In celebration, Fuji TV will be airing a 3.5-hour special this fall, including both anime and live-action segments. The animated segments will depict stories from the family's past and a new story about a family trip. Cool. It'll also feature 3 real families from Tokyo's Asagihaoka district, where Sazai-san is set. And the live-action segment will depict the family 20 years in the future, following onto a stage play from last year, which was set 10 years forward. There's also an impressive, if slightly terrifying, special exhibit running through the summer, which depicts the characters from Sazai-san in life-sized realistic dioramas. The figures bring the family to life with incredible detail, from rounded anime eyes and heads to textured hair and teeth. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and apparently so are the effects of the Uncanny Valley. In any case, the scenes are beautifully created, and we congratulate Sazai-san on this milestone. Finally, anime studio Kara has announced that it, as well as subsidiary Project Studio Q, will be switching 3D modeling software for future projects. They plan to switch to Blender, a free and open source 3D animation program. Blender has already been in use by the studio along with other programs, including on the new Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0 movie. They'll switch to using it exclusively after completion of that project. So if you want to use the same CG software used at Studio Kara, download Blender now. So there's the news. Imagine that. Yeah, the Sazai-san thing is pretty creepy. Gotta say, I can't really think of any really positives about that Sazai-san thing. Let's see here. Is there anything about poetry or haiku? Yes, The Garden of Words. That is an anime about poetry. Are there any good anime in 3D modeling software, made in 3D modeling software? Maybe I'm misunderstanding. It sounds like you're asking, Angel, is there any like 3D good like 3D CGI anime? Is that what you're asking? Because absolutely. Land of the Lustrous, if nothing else. Captain Harlock movie from a couple years ago, like 2012-ish. The Harlock movie, boy, that is some luscious animation, luscious anime there. CGI anime, you know. Is it anime? Is it not? Who knows? But yeah, there's some impressive CG, and obviously you have the hybrids, you know. Girls in Panzer with the CGI tanks, and of course, you know, Idolmaster and Love Live with the CGI, you know, dancing. Nothing wrong with that stuff. That can look awfully pretty. It can look cheap too, but in those shows they usually look pretty good. But yeah, I'd love to dig in to see what's going on there. Now, obviously, if they're working on something like Evangelion, you know, that means they're probably CGI rendering, you know, Evas and other things, not like anime characters in that. You know, they're not modeling Rei probably in those. So, so they don't have a CGI model of Rei Ayanami in Blender, except maybe, you know, if there's a shot of an Eva and, you know, you see the pilot inside, but if you see Rei in a close-up, that's going to be drawing. So you just saw the Crayon Shin-chan movie. Cool. How was that? That sounds fun. Yeah, hear that game escape. Yeah, I think animation in Blender would be a really good hobby attempt, I think. Because from what I can tell, I think you can get pretty far pretty fast. Obviously, you can't do like professional stuff in a couple of weeks, but there are so many tutorials online on how to do stuff in Blender that I think we could certainly kind of, you know, make enough progress to actually animate some stuff. I have done some like 2D animation stuff in Blender before, just, you know, drawing frames and then looping them. So you can do 2D as well as 3D in there. It's a little funky, like it's not really designed for 2D animation, but it'd be really fun to play around with that, and so certainly to play around with CGI. Also, you can do some fun like titles, title sequences of text zooming in and stuff like that. We can do cooking for a hobby hopper. I think Japanese cooking is absolutely one of our hobby hopper items. If folks want to be into that. If folks are wondering what Hobby Hopper is talking about, in the official Discord for Geek Archaeology, we are in our first month of this project called Hobby Hopper, where every month we try a different hobby. August has been the month of poetry, so we've been composing poetry on the Discord, which has been very interesting and a good experiment. But we're going to be jumping to something else in September, and probably tomorrow or at some point over the weekend, I will submit the poll for our next hobby. So we will choose that over the next few days and figure out what everyone wants to do, and we will explore another hobby. In fact, on that point, I wanted to go back into Hobby Hopper and see what folks have been writing, because we got some good stuff in here. I know Brad and Ciros are okay with me posting their poems, and I wanted to throw a few of those out there. Yeah. So Brad posted one about danger, like this one a lot too, or like this one a lot. Alien planet, beasts and poisons, disaster within. A young boy stuck and stranded, alone with his kin. A warning from his robotic friend. Danger, Will Robinson. That's a good one. That's a good one. Moving up. I did a few this week that I'm not particularly thrilled with, but kind of worked okay. Guarding many fallen heroes, silent stands the granite statue. Quiet he who stands forever, mute observer of the wild lands. Flocks of sheep stroll cross the meadows, birds flit chirping cross the skyline. Crickets sing among the rushes, lone wolves howl in search of dinner. Still the statue stands regardless, watching birth and life and death throes. He cares not, he's seen enough death from the heroes underneath him. Dying in the scores, in hundreds, heroes fell in all directions, and the bloodshed was so awful, now the statue stands forever. Always there as stone memorial, always as a mute reminder, warning men of wartime's folly, now a warning just to shepherds. Zeros did a fun one for your favorite. Named after the weapons we carry, in an eternal state of loss and disarray, our tasks not to be seen on any list, completely shrouded in a shady mystery. Are we to blame for the butterfly? 404, those who don't exist. Peace is what we need to gain, and yet it's still raining on the plain. The umbrella corrupts your views, no matter how gruesome the pain. As long as we are anti-rain, a legend continues. And then on the subject of favorites, Brad wrote, colors and movement to excite the eyes, triumph and tragedy to make you cry, tears of sadness, tears of joy, new lands and wonders to build or destroy. Ignore the drama, the prods and pokes. Sit back and laugh, enjoy the jokes. Overcoming strife or demons of old. Heroes and villains, their stories unfold. Take a seat and feast upon this buffet, for nothing satisfies quite like anime. Come on, that's great. Well done, Brad. So you see, trying out hobbies can bring out some really fun stuff. We should publish like a little anthology of verse from our hobby hopper. That was just too much fun. So yep, like that one a lot. Not quite sure what we're gonna do next month, but we'll figure it out. Because it's true, nothing satisfies quite like anime. Man, the amount of anime that I've watched that I've just just plain enjoyed, right? Just satisfying, straight up. I do like that idea, Jay, of doing let me scroll up. That story making exercise, like you were saying, where one person starts a story, the next person continues it. I think that'll be fun. There are definitely ways of doing that. And doing that possibly like on the Discord of just line by line by line. We'll see. It'd be fun to kind of do that in real time. Kind of gather everyone at a particular time to do that. You could have folks do the next line of a thing and live. I've done that before and it was a pretty good experience. Quite quite challenging at times because you're kind of pressured to come up with something live with everyone watching you, but that's part of the fun, part of the experience is doing that. Where you Neopets forums, yeah. So yes, you could do some fun stuff that way by just kind of being put on the spot and then going, I have to think. Oh, there we go. By the way, I wanted to share something. Well, I can only share part of it, actually. Let's see here. I think that's reasonably work safe. So we mentioned before this 3D printing project I have. I may have to okay, I'm going to have to, hold on. Yep, I have to do something. Just because, YouTube is very sensitive about these things. Just 1 second. There we go. Okay. So I've been 3D printing out of resin a ball jointed doll, which you sometimes see in for anime figurines. They're not like the actual figurines. They're these really big dolls that are multi-jointed. And to give you an idea of the scale, so here is, and again, we have to be modest here. Here's just the torso. So combine this. It is not biologically accurate. So this is just the body of the doll. So it's going to be pretty big, a couple of feet in size. I'm printing this out of resin just to kind of experiment and see what it would be like to have this. Partly because it's really hard to 3D print complex models. If you have I'll show you. So if you're trying to 3D print, something like this for your, to replicate one of these anime figurines, you can't really get like really high detail out of a 3D printer. It's not too bad, but it's a little bit blobby here and there. Here's an example of a bust, so to speak, just the top part of an anime figure, and that's actually pretty good in terms of quality. But with this, you can get just crazy detail. I know that's a little creepy, but that's pretty darn good in terms of detail there. So trying this out of resin to see what happens. Yes, that is a haro, right there. Haro. So it's been an interesting experience. This is a leg for one of these ball jointed dolls. So it's been an interesting experience. Actually, it might be it's like this, I think. There we go. Yeah, there we are. So it's been interesting to play around with this. I should have it all done and printed out. Thanks, Exit Bag. Yep, that is absolutely a Lane wall scroll. One of the few wall scrolls I have. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how all this comes together. So I should be able to finish printing this weekend, and I'll try stringing it together and putting it all together. I have eyes on order, which I was talking to Becca there on the Discord how odd it is to order eyes, doll eyes on the internet, and to know those are coming sometime soon. But yeah, I got a leg up on the project. Yeah. But yeah, and to give you an idea, you know, there's a hand. So as you can see, that's pretty detailed. I think you can actually see the fingernails. Obviously, I need to clean up some of those artifacts. But yeah, so if and when I get this all taken care of, I want to try printing like an anime figurine in the resin printer. The problem is the resin printer is fairly small. You can't print like really large things in there just because of the technology. But might, hopefully I can print something and get something at a decent size. So play around. Yeah, it's been a fun project. So I'm pretty close. Let me put these back so I don't lose them, because that would suck. Suddenly realize, oh wait, that goes there, that goes there, that goes there. Okay. So I've got to do the right arm. Like the right arm and the left foot, I think, is all that's left to print. But yeah, it's a fun project. It'll be fun to do that. Let's see here. I love old sci-fi movies. To me, Tron is not old, but that's just me. That is me being old. One of my earliest memories, actually, possibly my earliest memory, is seeing Tron. Because I distinctly remember being very young, and I would have been like 4 years old, going to the movie theaters, and there was an actual movie theater near here. And I remember walking into this theater and just running around and walking into a theater and opening the door and seeing all of these parts fly into the screen and coalesce into the shape of a man and then go, oh! I have a very strong memory of that. And that is the opening sequence of Tron. And again, that came out when I was about 4. So yeah, that is my thing. Puppeteering. Puppeteering. That would be a great hobby, actually. Make a puppet and play around with it, or buy a puppet, because you can get inexpensive puppets online. It's a good idea. But yeah, like my first memory is one of the ultimate geek movies. Boy, does that tell you something. Am I a Star Wars fan? Yes, in a weird way, in the sense that I grew up, again, as I was born many moons ago, and so I was a Star Wars fan during the Great Drought of the 80s and early 90s, when basically all there was the 4, 5, and 6. And then we got the Timothy Zahn novels, Heir to the Empire, and all those, and we started getting more Star Wars stuff. But it was basically just the 4, 5, and 6, like the Ewok movies, the Droids cartoons, those little bits and pieces here and there, but very little in the way of actual Star Wars material. So that was when I was huge into Star Wars. I remember going to Star Wars Episode 4 and falling asleep. Aw. So I loved it, and then when all of the Star Wars stuff came out, I enjoyed that, but I kind of moved on in my fandom. Like there were other things that had kind of captured my attention. Anime, frankly, was one of them. So I still enjoy Star Wars, but I'm not like that rabid consumer of Star Wars stuff that I used to be. And of course, there's There's just so much Star Wars out there, I just cannot keep up with it. Blade Runner is an amazing film. Um, Blade Runner is a little like Akira or Ghost in the Shell, where it's more like Ghost in the Shell, where like you don't have to like that movie, but the movie is operating on multiple levels that is worth appreciating and understanding and recognizing, right? Again, you don't have to like the movie, but it's worth saying it's not just a dull movie, right? It is multi-leveled in that sense. Absolutely anime potential. Well, they did the Blade Runner anime short. Firestop 2049, whatever it was, which was that's anime in the Blade Runner universe, and we kind of sort of had Blade Runner with a Bubblegum Crisis. But yeah, I think you could absolutely do an anime series in the Blade Runner universe. I mean, Bubblegum Crisis is basically Blade Runner, anime-fied in the sense that it's a very anime universe, with Blade Runner concepts kind of woven into it, but it's not Blade Runner. Yeah, you could absolutely do a story. I'd love to see an anime series, focusing on a replicant, like an explicitly a replicant, who is going around doing stuff, and is seeing, we're seeing things from that perspective, and seeing things from the perspective of humans, seeing that replicant and what that replicant is, kind of like the sequel, Blade Runner 2049. There's plenty of potential there. The problem though is that Blade Runner is intentionally a slice of that universe that is really the most interesting slice of that universe in that sense, right? Like, I don't want a Blade Runner series set in the off-world colonies. I don't want a Blade Runner series that's about anything other than what we see in that film. So it's kind of hard to it's hard to grasp on to what a Blade Runner series would be, except for just expanding the concepts of the movie. So that's the difficulty. Star Wars, you can do lots of different stories in Star Wars, but Blade Runner is kind of a very specific tone, very specific set of themes. I do I read comics? That's it. That's also weird. See, those three shelves there are all comics, but I don't think any of them are DC or Marvel. And that's not because I'm trying to be hipster. It's because I don't find superheroes particularly engaging. The idea that the world will be saved by special people who are the only ones allowed to solve problems just doesn't really interest me very much. And the idea that your hero is somebody who has been sort of chosen by the fates to solve problems just doesn't really interest me as an archetype. But I like other stuff. I like graphic novels like very much that. Like these. And some of these are, in fact, one of this, I believe, is, it's Vertigo. Obviously Mouse, one of the great graphic novels of all time. But because it is, and I'll try to find one that's not particularly depressing. That's not bad. Because it is about, concentration camps. And because of the way it's told, makes that much more palatable than a lot of other things. A lot of other, portrayals of that, while also keeping the grittiness and the horror of it. Unknown Soldier, where a doctor who goes to Africa and witnesses all the horrors of basically Robert Coney and the child soldiers and all that, just goes nuts and just starts murdering people. But he's a doctor, so when he comes out of that kind of fugue state, he's horrified by his actions. And so it's this very interesting play on this idea that, you may this may feel very satisfying, but he's also literally breaking his oath. Cowboy Ninja Viking, which is about a character with multiple personalities, a cowboy, ninja, and a Viking, and how those come out in this sort of ridiculous action story. I'm trying to find something that's not it can get pretty gritty, but I just love the art style, how different it is. I just love comics like this where it's not what you're used to. Stuff like Unflattening, which is a really weird comic. It's not a graphic novel in the classic sense. It is images with text to muse on various things. So it is a combination of images and text, but it's not, superhero punch things. So I like a lot of weird things. And obviously also, a lot of manga. I kind of like the manga stuff. Is the trope of robots having consciousness a fairly new idea in the 80s? New. That was not a new idea in the 50s. The idea of conscious robots and dealing with the consequences of that had been around for a long time. I mean, Metropolis deals with that in the 1920s. So that idea has been around for a very, very long time. Is Lane my absolute favorite anime? Not anymore, because I've seen it so much, it's become so familiar to me. It is just another anime, which I respect and love in a lot of ways, but I don't sit down to watch Lane for fun, right? The way I would do, say, El Hazard, or the way I would do, the way I've been doing with how heavy are those dumbbells you lift, right? There's lots of other anime that I enjoy more than Lane. Lane is definitely the anime with the most layers. Thus the name of the title, Layer 01. That's, there's a lot to unpack in Lane, but that's not necessarily what you want to do when you sit down to watch anime all the time. Sometimes you want to watch something just really goofy. Sometimes you want to watch something that is adventurous. Sometimes you want to watch something that is, more about how different characters are interacting and working. One of the things I love I was rewatching some of Haruhi Suzumiya with some friends and realizing the craft that went into the animation of that, all the different things they thought through about where the different things are, and especially in episode 0, just all the little I don't know, just elements of that and what they're trying to get across just really impresses the heck out of me. Even though it is fundamentally a comedy, there's a lot in Haruhi Suzumiya that I really like. Lucky Star. If you want fun, just Lucky Star, pop that in. Did pop culture change anime? Well, anime is pop culture. So I think that is those kinds of, move around. Well, people bash Haruhi because Haruhi was popular, and so everything that's popular gets a backlash. And it can possibly be good if it's popular, is often how that goes. But the fact that remains is that Haruhi is a really impressive work of animation. And I include season 2 in that. Haruhi was a very intentional work of animation. Again, you don't have to like it, but it is a reality. Haruhi's in your top 5? Yeah. It also helps being an anime fan and watching Haruhi because you get kind of the things it's making fun of, moe and bizarre science fiction storylines. You're like, okay, here we go. Of course there's an alien involved. But yeah. So yeah, I think pop culture has absolutely influenced anime, but anime influences pop culture, and that is an Ouroboros all the time. Russian influences on anime. That's a good question. I do not. I can't point to anything specific, other than the Snow Queen, where Miyazaki watched the Snow Queen, which is a famous Russian animated film, when he was a kid, and that was one of the things that really inspired him to become an animator. But other than that, Hey, Angel. Good choice. Blame is absolutely up there with me. Um, so I don't know if there was anything, and it's one of those weird things about influence. I don't know that there's any one work of Russian animation that you can point to say, obviously, Akira took this thing from Russian animation. But I do suspect that there is something to the tone that Russian animation has that's often very cynical. That's often has this melancholy to it that I think you often see in anime. I think Cat Soup is a good example of that tone, where Cat Soup has that quality to it. I think we can definitely see things that could trace its way back to Russian animation. But yeah, I can't think of anything of any firm ties one way or the other. Plot-based narratives versus character-based ones. That's a big topic. Every time I get into those conversations, because I find that stuff fascinating. I totally agree, Spin. Because whenever we get into that topic, people are like, well, is that really plot-based? Is that really character-based? It gets kind of noodly fairly quickly. Let's see here. So let's define our terms. Plot-based anime. I define our anime in which the evolution of the character's personality, of their character, is overshadowed time-wise and sort of scale-wise by the events of the story. So, as an example, Raiders of the Lost Ark is a plot-driven story, right? No one really changes in Raiders, but there's a lot of big stuff going on, and that's really what drives people forward. Whereas character-based is obviously kind of the opposite, where you're focusing more on the characters and their interactions than on anything actually happening. Haruhi Suzumiya, very character-based, where it's all about what these characters want and what they're pushing each other to do, and all that. That's a good point, JJ. I think you're absolutely right that thanks to all of the exposure of anime, there's so much influence of anime in other media, and we're certainly also seeing anime. We're seeing anime like stuff in European animation and indeed Russian animation and such. I wish I'd gone to that Big Red, the Russian and anime panel at Otakon. I did not make it to that one, and that looked really interesting. Because I think this is also something that is really changed in anime in general. I think you can draw a pretty clear plot to show that anime of say the 60s and 70s was very plot driven. There was a transition in the 80s driven by shows like earlier Rose of Versailles in 79, but also shows like Macross and indeed Gundam, of a drive towards character-driven stories. You saw kind of a switch back to plot-driven in the 90s, at least in the big shows. But then the 2000s and the 2010s were much more character-driven, because they were all slice of life high school romance stories, right? And those are all character driven. Like, there's nothing really happening in those. Thank you, Big Red. That's very, very nice of you. Big Red, if you can share, if you remember anything, what were some of the highlights of that Russians in anime panel? Was it literally like listing Russian characters in anime, particularly? Speaking of, there's a moment I wanted to share from Dumbbells, in I think episode 7. Okay, the show is worth watching just for this episode. It's either 6 or 7, where the main character decides to try out for an arm wrestling contest at the gym, and the episode suddenly turns into a sports anime where everyone gets like really intense, and there's all this, she's gonna do it. What's going on? Oh my gosh, is she doing the thing? She's gonna do the thing, and everyone gets really serious. And it gets really high drama, and of course, a Russian challenger just happens to be visiting Japan that day and comes to the gym and challenges the main girl in this arm wrestling championship. And she's been training since she was like 4 years old in arm wrestling. It's all this big dramatic sports anime stuff. And she has, I think it is episode 6, and she keeps like changing her personality. So sometimes she's like kind of distant, sometimes she's really energetic. And they mention this to her at some point, and she says, "Well, to be honest, I've watched a lot of anime, and I've noticed that Russian characters in anime always follow one of 3 cliches. They are absurdly fanatical about their sport. They are, or they are cold and calculating, and or they are absurdly nationalistic about Mother Russia. So I kind of have to, hold up my stereotype and keep that running. So I'm making sure to spend time in each of those sort of personality modes for people here in Japan. So I'm kind of representing the stereotypes of Russian anime characters." And I was just like, "Yep, like it is true. Those are the stereotypes of Russian girls in anime." So I kind of appreciated that. Heavily based on the relationship Japan and Russia had as outsiders. Yeah, okay. Please post those, Big Red. That would be very, very interesting. Yeah, because Russia and Japan were absolutely the big outsider powers in the early 20th century and the late 1900s, or the late 1800s as well. And so they saw themselves as kind of a kindred, as comrades, we might say. And that caused some interesting viewpoints. So yeah, I can totally see some cultural flow between the two. Excuse me. There are a lot of Russian characters in anime, actually. Partly because of that whole the Rocky stereotype, if you will. The extraordinarily skilled, Russian competitor. That's an archetype in a lot of sports stories. Thanks, Finn. Yeah, and that's all. That's all from Dumbbell. Oddly enough. But yeah, it is kind of interesting how there's that real stereotype there. Right, and then Japan beat Russia. It's like, what? No. Excuse me? Japan can do that now? That's kind of scary. Yeah, well, and slice of life is sort of it's become integrated into a lot of our storytelling now. We don't really we have fewer straight slice of life anime than we used to. Where it's not just a guy and 6 cute girls, in high school. There's usually something else going on. It's another, or it's something else woven into that stereotype. Yeah, and we kind of slice of life is out there, and I think we've also kind of figured out that slice of life is a genre. It exists. It's fine. It's not going to take over anime and kill it, which was kind of the argument and complaint. But it's one of those things where, yeah, slice of life is a thing, and you can like it or not, and that's fine. But like I talk about in my biggest mistakes Otaku make panel, yeah, I've seen a lot of arguments about what's going to kill anime. I've seen literally about a dozen different things seriously being argued as these are going to be the death of anime, and none of them are ever the death of anime. So it's like, come on. All right, thanks for stopping by, YK2K. We'll be back next week. FYI, we got to Anime Club tomorrow. More Evangelion. Episode 7 through 12 should be tomorrow, if any of you can make that. Are there emerging trends in Japan that we have yet to see here in the US that'll be the next big thing in a few years? Hard to say because, there are often trends in Japan that don't make it over here, that don't really take off. I think figurines are actually a good example of that, where there are more people now collecting figurines, but it's still not the widespread obsession among otaku that it is over in Japan. What are some trends in Japan? I do not know. I think... Actually, I do know. We're seeing a growth in stories and focus on things like minimalism and simplicity and kind of back to the basics kind of stuff. And I can see that becoming a thing. Oh, I see. So you're talking about trends in terms of like anime genre trends. Gotcha. There's a lot of fantasy out there. I think we're going to see like fantasy anime have a real comeback, partly in terms of isekai. I think isekai is still going strong. I think we're hitting, I don't want to say peak isekai, but I think there are enough isekai now that we are cresting that wave where we're probably not going to see many more isekai per season than we do now. We'll still have 3 or 4 per season, but we're probably never going to get much beyond that. And then it'll start trailing off in a couple of years. Because I think that will either tap out or somebody will do something in isekai that will blow the doors open. They'll find the next twist. See, I would argue it's not oversaturated, Matt, because people are buying it. People are tuning in and watching. It's like Slice of Life was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. That is a thing. I did not hear that, JJ. I wouldn't be surprised. But what that just means is it's popular. It means there's a bunch of stuff. It's like, so the same thing happened in young adult after Harry Potter and Twilight, where there was just a flood of the stuff on the market. That doesn't mean that all that fiction was dying out. It just meant it was peaking, right? And there was just tons and tons of it out there, but it was going strong, right? It wasn't like about to crash. It was just doing very well and heading for that relative downward slope, where you're never going to have that that huge volume forever. But there's still plenty of YA stuff. There's still plenty of Harry Potter-esque YA fantasy out there. Gotcha, JJ. That again would not surprise me at all. But again, I think that's just because of volume. I think we are at high volume. There's absolutely room for growth in other genres. Here's the question. In my opinion, the 80s was a decade of bold anime, of big epic anime, Macross and Bubblegum Crisis and things like that, Akira, because it was a big decade for Japan. Lots of the big things were happening. The 90s was a decade of science fiction and kind of exploration and wild settings, because with the downturn in the market, people wanted some escapism, right? And so they wanted the idea of going to wild places. When that sunk in, that Japan was on this long ride of this sort of relatively low economic growth, that switched over. Yeah, big budgets, exactly, JJ. When that settled in, folks wanted escapism in the sense of a return to a halcyon period in their life. thinking back to the golden age of their lives, if you will. And that's when we got all of the high school slice of life stuff of the 2000s. Imagining back to when you were young and you were in love and all that stuff. So you got all that stuff. So the question is, what is the isekai genre symbolizing for Japan right now? Right? Why is that the genre of the moment? And I honestly don't know the answer to that. I'm thinking about it right off the top of my head, because isekai represents the idea of there being another more exciting reality that's just around the corner. So maybe I'm reading too much into this, but maybe isekai represents that that rise out of that trough of the economic downturn. The idea that things are getting better, things are improving, and so people are seeing, okay, we may have the 80s again. Not exactly, but we're that wonderful life is there. Escapism, video games. I think video games are a clear part of it. So that's an interesting point. I think part of it is the fact that video games are now so integrated into daily life that we're now starting to see people explore that kind of in their fictions, in their fantasies. The idea of video games being normal, not just a hobby, but the thing everyone does. Excuse me. So yeah, I think it's certainly exploring that. And that could be it just alone, that isekai series are exploring this idea that we spend a lot of our times in fantasy worlds. And not just like reading a novel or watching a movie, it's much more participatory. Thus isekai, where you're literally diving into another world. So yeah, that could very much be it. And not just video games, also just digital culture in general. This idea that we come home and sit down in front of the computer and we're surfing the internet, to use an outmoded phrase, but we are kind of living digitally, if you will, for significant chunks of our existence. Which is, in a sense, good, because what that suggests is that isekai is just part of understanding and exploring that aspect of real life, right? There's once we realize that that's normal, that that's just kind of part of how we live, we're gonna see that change. I can see a new genre that is very much concerned with not just slice of life, but that is about kind of exploring life in a very detailed, mundane way, where it is an anime series set at a restaurant in real time. So it's over the course of one day at a restaurant, and every episode is half an hour in that day. And it's 6 hours in the life of this one day in this restaurant. Kind of extreme slice of life, if you will. I can see that happening. Again, it's kind of a reaction to say, instead of spending all our lives in these fantasy worlds, what if we focus really deeply on our own world? Right, working a Ragnaria. In that way. But yeah, I mean, new genres can absolutely emerge from the blending of anime genres. Look at Mecha and Real Robot, where Real Robot was very much a blending of Super Robot and the seriousness of shows like Yamato. And we got Real Robot. Rose of Versailles arguably created the modern shoujo series. That's a really good point, JJ. I love that. That you're building up power to oppose that other force, much like Japan is doing militarily. That's a really good point. It's a really interesting point. Ooh, there's a trailer for the Pluto anime. I'll have to check that out. I can see a sci-fi mixed with horror kind of genre. Yeah, Lily Cat, in other words. Which is basically the movie Alien with a tentacle monster. From the 80s, I think it was. Felt very 80s. But yeah, no, I would, that would be cool. Seeing more horror sci-fi would be fun. I love to see just more sci-fi. Period. More stuff it's about, okay, how do we do this stuff? How do we actually, well, what does that future look like? Like Astra Lost in Space. Excuse me. Looking forward to what the future might look like. We might also see more really near future science fiction. So not, spaceships and alien worlds, but like Time of Eve. Stuff about, okay, what is the future going to look like in a world of self-driving cars and ubiquitous AI and all that stuff. Especially as we're grappling with, I don't want to say just deeper, but this headlong rush into a lot of these technologies and this sort of future shock. I can see a desire for anime that explores that. And I can see people supporting a show that does that. The problem is I do think that, so the other side of that coin is commercialism. It has to sell. So it's hard to market and commercialize a show that's about Roombas, right? Or that's about this abstract concept of AI. It still needs to fit in those formulas that sell in the mass market. Because ultimately, it is Kadokawa and Bandai that are bankrolling these things. And so they need to move, 10 million model kits for the show to make sense, which is one of the problems with it. It's why I'm actually really happy to see shows like Girls in Panzer, which is an original show by a studio that is designed to be, very merchandisable and marketable, but is designed, fundamentally also to be just an entertaining, anime property and franchise, where it's like you can do, you can have cute merchandise and all that kind of stuff. You can have cute girl characters, but it is built to be something that is fundamentally well structured and satisfying as anime in and of itself. Just reading up on that recently for the trivia. Yeah, when the Pluto anime comes out, I may go back and reread Pluto, because that might be my favorite manga. I don't know. Pluto's weird because it is this adaptation. It's not Astro Boy. It's not really Naoki Urasawa either. It's this hybrid, and telling a very odd story for Urasawa, in the sense that you're trying to adapt this shonen storyline into this very realistic world, which is one of the reasons I love it so much. But it's very idiosyncratic, which is hard. Yeah, totally. Time of Eve, blend a lot of genre as well. But again, that's an OVA. That is a side project. That's not Fairy Tail, right? It's not what gets the big marketing push. So the other question is whether in the future we're going to see crowdfunding take off. Whether we're going to see different models of funding that are able to support those more experimental, less commercial works. Which doesn't mean the commercial stuff will go away. We'll still have our Dragon Balls and such. But I would love to see a future where there is a healthy amount of stuff where the fans can just say, no, I want Cowboy Bebop 2. I want Trigun Season 2. I want this, I want that. I want another season of Slayers or whatever. And giving the studio the money to do that. And specifically that. That would be really awesome. And hopefully we'll start seeing those sorts of things as crowdfunding becomes more proven and becomes a more kind of effective way of doing those things. Will we ever see a resurgence of the type of sci-fi anime to level of popularity we saw in the 80s? Good question, digital streamer. I'll be honest, I hope so. The problem with that is always you can never go home again. It's unlikely that anything will ever be as popular as it was in some other period in that way. I was really hoping that we would see more, particularly the sci-fi anime of like the 90s. Um, but I think it is possible to for sci-fi to come back in a big way. I think it's just going to be different sci-fi, right? Ah, Claymore. Yep. Sure. Yeah. And you're right, Matt. I mean, there's plenty of questions around, plenty of topics you can structure an anime around to sort of answer those questions of can you make a robot that feels, and why would you? I love how Time of Eve addressed that actually because it is about it's partly about like robots that take care of us, you know, caretakers literally. It's like you better hope they feel, right? You absolutely want them to feel because they are literally taking care of you. Do you think anime being 4K Blu-ray coming more popular in the future? Absolutely. You know, there's no reason not to have higher quality anime. And the studios, fortunately, are now on that path where they are upgrading consistently. And it's not like in the bad old days where they're like, we're just going to keep on doing things, ink and paint, and we're never going to get computers. Say what you will about the advent of computers, that also allowed us to get high def and things along those lines, which we kind of weren't getting back in the day. So the studios now, I think, are realizing we should, be upping the quality of our releases, which is pretty cool. Good point, Digital Streamer. I think we may see another boom in sci-fi. Well, we might also see something big if SpaceX can actually do a Mars shot, right? That could really get people realizing, wait, we might actually spend our lives, or our grandchildren might actually be born in space. So we should start thinking about that seriously. Cool. The Pat Labor remake did well on Blu-ray. That's good to hear. Right, tons of ethical questions. I mean, and there's oh my gosh, tens of thousands of sci-fi books to draw on that have explored these questions for the past century, but especially the past couple of decades. So you could absolutely start doing that. I would actually love to see more anime that adapts, novels, and not like light novels, but Arthur C. Clarke and Isaac Asimov. Right? Do anime adaptations of that, and not like straight adaptations, but do inspired by the works of Isaac Asimov. I think you do some really fun, interesting stuff there, because there's a lot explored that you could do some interesting stuff with, without feeling beholden to the actual plot of Foundation and Empire or whatever whatever particular books that he wrote. R. Daniel Olivaw in the Foundation series. And the robot novels by Asimov are all about the creation of the first robot that has a human level intelligence and what that means, right? Where you get robots that can understand the concept of empathy, can understand the concept of feelings, and may or may not have that in a human sense, but because they can grasp it, they can respond to it, and they can, take actions that are equivalent to, caring for somebody and exploring what does that mean, right? Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think Foundation has lots of potential. Now, again, you'd have to go in a particular direction. Foundation is a very talky, series, so you could add in more action, you could add in more drama. It could be more Blade Runner-esque, Blade Runner is based on a very talky novel. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is not a very exciting novel. It is this weird, gritty quasi noir thing with lots of weird asides. I mean, Philip K. Dick was a weird writer. And Blade Runner made it into a very visually arresting and entertaining novel. So you can totally do that. Calling anime with robot girls with a control society. A female computer named Lachia. That's a good question. I do not know. I'm not familiar with that. Beatless? Is that Beatless? Huh. And if robots can be empathetic as human to the laws of robotics still apply. Yeah, that's the interesting thing about Ardanil Lavaw is he is still bound by the 3 laws of robotics. Asimov's 3 laws. But how that kind of works. One second. Beatless. Oh, okay. Yeah, I've just seen like posters for this and images of that, but nothing beyond that. Interesting. Is Gonzo still making stuff? That's a really good question. As I understand it, Gonzo has kind of been gutted. I think they're still around. They're still making stuff. Indeed, apparently, no, never mind. Looking up on Mal. They are working on the upcoming Phantasy Star Online 2 TV series. They did Try Knights, which was the rugby anime. They did Seven Seeds. They're actually doing a lot. I take it back. Oh, and of course they're doing Tiramisu. Uchu Senkan Tiramisu is their thing. So they're still around. Absolutely. And what was the name of this? Calamity of the Zombie Girl. They're doing, or they did. They did Hinomaru Zumo, which was the sumo anime from what, last year? October 2018, fall 2018. They're still around. They're still doing stuff. I forgot they also did 3 Full Metal Panic movies in 2017, 2018. Interesting. I think that is just their re-edits of the TV series, though. Bones is still around. Absolutely. Tiramisu is a comedy. It's basically a Gundam comedy. It is a, I think one of those 7-minute short things about a pilot in a mecha in the middle of a space war. But it's all about how like he has trouble eating his bento in the cockpit because it's 0 gravity, and he's trying to like grab stuff with chopsticks as it's floating around. Just a screwball comedy about mecha pilots, basically. Which is I saw a few episodes of it and thought it was a lot of fun. Like they're clearly enjoying that. But definitely, I would say, scrolling back through here. I mean, here's the thing. Back in the day, Gonzo was Last Exile. They were Lion Barrel of Iron. They were Saki, Shangri-La. They were Full Metal Panic, Strike Witches. They were one of the premier anime studios. Tower of Duraga. They did a lot of high-profile work. Afro Samurai, Blue Drop, Kitty Grade, Bokurano. Wow, Bokurano. I forgot about that. And now they are Phantasy Star Online 2 and a rugby anime. It does feel like they're not doing a lot of original, challenging work anymore. It's basically just the classic anime stuff, sadly. Right, he can't leave the robot due to his anxiety. He has to stay inside. Um, More historical anime would be nice. I get the sense, I do not have evidence, but I get the sense that historical anime is uh, not very profitable. And unless it's being done, on NHK or it's being financed by a historical society or something, that I don't think it makes much money, sadly. Kind of like over here, we don't get a lot of historical stuff unless it's like fantasy, which is a shame. Sounds like work is fun. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Gonzo made Gankutsuo. Wait a minute. Didn't they? Huh. I'm not seeing it in their list. Oh, that's why. Yeah, Gankutsuo. Desert Punk, Speed Grapher, Samurai 7, Gantz, Chrono Crusade, Gadgard, or like Kaleido Star, Gatekeepers 21, Saikano. Like Saikano. That was a Gonzo show. So yeah. More food anime. Golden Kamuy is absolutely historical. And it is, set in a historical period. It is not really about that history from what I've seen of it. But yeah, Gainax is basically an Evangelion remake factory now. Granted, so is Kara basically, but at least Kara does the side projects of the short films. But yeah, right. Yeah, if we get history, we get weird, goofy comedies. Before I forget, now that we're bringing up history, let's do that. There we go. Oh, I need to. My thing died. Is it back? It might be back. Let's find out. Nope, it's not back. Hmm. Okay. I'm gonna get some weird noises. There are the weird noises while I reconnect my control panel. Okay. Mythology and anime series, kind of like Arion back in the day. Welcome, everyone, to Anime History for the week of August 23rd, 2019. Quite a few things happened this week in anime history, particularly the birth of Toshio Suzuki, former president of Studio Ghibli, born August 19th, 1948. Suzuki, famous as the person who, while working at Animage, was sent to interview the famously reclusive Hayao Miyazaki back in the early days when he just didn't really give interviews, didn't really talk to anybody. And Suzuki went to meet Miyazaki and reportedly went, and Miyazaki refused to meet with him. He was too busy and kept moving around doing stuff. And so Suzuki just went into his office and sat in his office waiting for Miyazaki to, stop being busy, and just waited there all day. Until finally at the end of the day, Miyazaki went over and said, okay, fine, and talked to him a little bit. And that interview was published with a photo of Miyazaki from the rear with a caption, "This is a photo of the legendary Hayao Miyazaki's, the back of his head, because he's so busy he wouldn't actually pause for a photo of his face, so I just had to take a photo of the back of his head." And so that's what appeared in Animage. But then they became friends, and shortly thereafter, they started talking, and they have talked every day since. Best of friends, and it was Suzuki who advised Miyazaki to make a manga out of Nausicaa: The Valley of Wind when Miyazaki could not get financing for it, and offered to publish Nausicaa in the pages of Animage as a special manga to drum up support for the film. So if it were not for that, we would not have Nausicaa, we would not have Studio Ghibli. And then the two of them, along with Takahata, founded Studio Ghibli and back in the 80s, and that's where that came from. So he has been Miyazaki's big supporter, and also often the one kind of pushing Miyazaki to make his movies and finding ways to encourage Miyazaki to keep up with his work. Did the same with Takahata back before he passed away. So thank you, Suzuki, for all you've done to essentially make Studio Ghibli operate and continue and work. Great guy. Also, this week was the premiere of the Daikon 4 animation, a very famous animation made by a bunch of recent college grads and also just college students who got together to animate an opening credit sequence for the Daikon 4 convention in Japan back in 1983. They'd done that earlier in 1981 for Daikon 3. The convention skipped years. It was held every other year. On August 22nd, they made this short film called Daikon 3. Didn't quite finish it in time for the convention, and so had some issues there, and what they actually showed was unfinished. But they eventually finished it and then premiered Daikon 4 2 years later as this legendary animation showing all sorts of sci-fi and anime characters all interacting. You have the bunny girl here who fights Darth Vader with a lightsaber, and then fights the alien from Alien, and fights a giant transforming mecha, all sorts of stuff, and has this wonderful representation of all things sci-fi and fantasy. And that was made by, excuse me, that was made by a group of folks who would go on to form Studio Gainax, the studio that made Evangelion and Nadia and Wings of Honey Misei and many other very well-known anime works. So the initial inspiration for Gainax right here in 1983. That is this week in anime history. The visions dancing in my mind, early dawn, the shades of time, twilight crawling through my window pane. Miyazaki the tsundere, he is absolutely that. There's no question. He is not really interested in doing things for other people, but Suzuki finds ways. Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. Twilight is a very catchy song. It's a lovely, lovely piece of music. Do I know what happened to Gonzo? From what I've heard, the talent just kind of creeped away. People just kept losing talent to other studios, and it just kind of fell apart over time. So they still exist, they still make stuff, but there's no creative drive there anymore, sadly. And I think it's just one of those things that happens over time, which is a shame. I also believe, again, from what I heard, that Gonzo was chronically short on money. They just kept making these moonshots and trying to do weird stuff like Romeo x Juliet, which I liked a lot, but of what little I saw. But their stuff just wasn't commercially successful very much. So eventually they had to take on less creatively challenging work and more stuff like a rugby anime, right? That is just the reality of things. So yeah, it's a shame, but it happens. And then we get stuff like Comics Wave. We get, then Makoto Shinkai shows up, and so it's not all bad. Things evolve. All right, so we've done the news. We've talked about some really fascinating stuff. We've done Hobby Hopper. we've done anime history. Was there anything else? I'm trying to think. Like I said, Anime Club tomorrow. More Evangelion. Is Dot Hack the father of Isekai? Maybe. No. El Hazard is the father of Isekai. El Hazard is the first Isekai series that I know of. Trying to think of anything. Yeah, I think El Hazard is really. I mean, that is what happens there. They get transported to another fantasy world. I would say Dot Hack is the father of the video game Isekai. Right. It is definitely that trope, and very clearly that trope. I would also argue that Dot Hack is the first intentional transmedia anime franchise. I'm actually taking an online course about transmedia storytelling right now. Transmedia being the idea of a franchise or a world or what have you, which has multiple different media involved and different stories within those media, and where no one medium is dominant over the other, right? So you can get into Transformers through the cartoons or through the movies or through comic books or through whatever, and you don't have to watch the movies to be a Transformers fan, right? And Dot Hack was very clearly meant to be that, where the video games and the anime and the manga are all different pieces of this puzzle, and they all give you different elements of it. And you do learn more the more of those media you consume, but none of those things was the one central element of it. Although I think the video games were kind of more central, but it was definitely trying to be that. Yeah, I don't think that's what we mean, JJ. I think like transported to like an alternate dimension kind of a world. Is more what we're talking about there. But yeah, and you see transmedia much more often in like Asian franchises than Western franchises. I think it's one of those things where we just haven't caught up yet. But that's been a pretty common thing amongst a lot of franchises. Where again, you think even Astro Boy. You get into it through the manga or through one of the anime series or through like the CGI movie or whatever. There are lots of kind of ins to Astro Boy. And a lot of these other things. Even like Madoka Magica. Certainly the anime are kind of the central thing, but there are plenty of people who are get into it through novels or whatever. So, all right, guys, I think that's gonna have to do it for me for tonight. I've had a really long week, and I need some sleep. So, as always, this has been an amazing conversation. I want to thank you all. I hope some of you can join me for EVA tomorrow. It's always a lot more fun to watch things as a group. So hopefully you will join me for some EVA tomorrow. And that'll be the plan there. And yeah, it's near the end of August, so the Otaku Time Capsule might be showing up again. Who knows? But yeah, I think that'll do it for us for tonight. Thank you all so much. As always, this has been awesome. Hope you all have enjoyed your time. Thank you for being here. And until next time, watch more anime. See y'all.